Hello and welcome to F1 with my uncle for our weekend recap of the Miami Grand Prix. I'm Matt and joined as always by my uncle, Dan. What a crazy race.
Hey, Matt, that was an exciting race. I mean, Miami went all out for this race. There
Yeah,
were stars out, there were political figures out. Everybody was there. You had
everybody.
Willie T. Rebs doing the interviews at the
Dude,
end. I mean,
okay, hold on a second. Can we have him do the post race interview at every single race from now on? Because that was amazing.
well, if he needs a gig as a podcaster, we could use a third guy. So yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, that's a great story. He's got a great life story. There's a
Yeah,
documentary about it. I've watched it. It's awesome. Anyway, yeah, good guy. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's it was a fantastic race. There's where do you want to start with this?
I don't know. I think we obviously want to touch on practice and qualifying at some point. We should probably knock that out of the way pretty quick just to
Sure, sure.
give the
We
context.
can yeah, we can cover that. It was honestly, I could not wait for practice for Miami
Yeah.
just because it was the first time we'd seen a car on this track.
Yeah. Brand new track.
And brand new track, and I wanted to see a car on the track. I'm done with, the video game format
Right.
and guessing what it's gonna be like.
Or
And of
just the
course,
artist renderings or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and the 3D modeling, there and honestly, that stuff, there's nothing that compares with reality.
Right.
And in this case, that was really true because, like, one of the things that we saw right off the bat was that if you the track itself was bumpy in spots that got a lot of complaints.
Hmm.
That mimics porpoising, but it's not porpoising. It's bumpy, which is a weird thing. And but mainly the curbs and stuff were really, really slick. They were a completely
Right.
different surface in it. And there was a time. Now maybe the curbs got some rubber on them and the shine on the paint, the slickness went away after over a little bit over time. But during the practice sessions, if you put a tire firmly on the curb in a corner, you lost traction. And
Yeah.
some people were able to spin and not hit a wall, and then other people basically wadded their cars up and red flagged the session. That was, in fact, I think what we need to talk about is there were some drivers that, Max in particular, wadded his car up during practice.
Hmm.
And then, because he hit the concrete, and there were parts of this track that didn't have a safer barrier, they had concrete, which was a little interesting near those real tight corners.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but because of that, he slid into a corner, slid into a wall, and caused a red flag session. They hauled his car back, and they did not diagnose a transmission problem or gearbox problem, but because he hit the rear tire so hard against the wall, they decided, out of an abundance of caution, to go ahead and replace the gearbox. Not because they diagnosed it with a mechanical error after his contact with the wall, but they didn't want there to be something wrong inside the gearbox that caused a reliability issue during the race. Bottom line. So now the issue with that was there's two issues with that in this particular race weekend. One is he's now on his third gearbox of four allotted for the season.
Oof.
Now, that does not mean that gearbox number two is damaged, but my guess is they're going to take gearbox number two and they're going to ship it back to wherever, the
Right.
factory in Milton Keynes or Japan or wherever, and they're going to test it and just make sure that it meets specs. And then they can return it, and they can put it back in the car without using a penalty because it's a existing gearbox. So, and then they have number four in reserve. But
Now, quick question about that. Are they able to act like if they see that there's something wrong with it, are they able to fix it without getting a penalty or would that incur a penalty?
no, I believe that that will incur a penalty.
Okay.
Well, now I'm going to put a caveat on that. Sometimes you can replace a transmission if you replace a power plant, I think,
Okay.
but I'm not positive. I think if you exceed the number
Right, right.
four, then you're going to have a penalty because that's your allotment, and that's
Okay.
part of the cost cap and all that sort of thing.
Right, right, right. Okay.
You know what? The rules change on that every year a little bit. It's very specific, but generally speaking, that's the answer.
Okay.
Is you're allowed four. Now that you know, I'm going to take a little side note. They call them power units now, and that's a new thing. They used to be motors, engines. Now they're all power units. And the reason they're doing that is electric engines are also called power units. So they're kind of using a generic term to refer to anything that produces power nowadays, whether it's gasoline or electric. Just that I throw that out, something I've observed.
So, anything interesting from practice? Anything else?
Yeah, finishing up on Max. So there were two issues with that. One was he's using the third gearbox. The second issue was they did rush to get that gearbox added back in so that he could get back out to get some laps in because he just had not had a lot of time on the track before this happened. And similar to what happened last time they had to work on his car in a hurry, his he was losing. He got that same. He reported the same. The I can't steer the car. The steering's heavy was the first report.
Hmm.
Second report was I can't steer the car, and then he had a fire in the brake area.
Mm,
So you have heavy steering and a fire. Does that sound familiar?
yeah.
Yes, that's what happened in Australia.
Right.
So um, and so they brought the car in. Now this is practice, not the race, and they sorted it out by third practice on Saturday afternoon. But and by qualifying, they got it all sorted out overnight. It was fine. But I just thought, oh man, here come the reliability issues again, just like Australia. At that time, I thought that. But what I realize now, I'm going to assume is that when they have to replace, say, the gearbox or work on the hydraulic system in a time sensitive manner, it's hard to get it right because
Hmm.
there's twice now that they've had a hydraulic leak, and technically brake fluid is hydraulic fluid, and it's caused a fire that because it's flammable. And it's probably it could be fuel, could be hydraulic fluid, whatever, or it could be combination of the above. They're having to remove lines to do those changes, and they're just not getting them taking the time to get them back in correctly.
Yeah, that was my biggest concern going into the weekend is given what we've seen from Red Bull so far with like 3 DNFs in 4 races total between them. Like I was expecting, not expecting. I was hoping that that we wouldn't get a repeat of that, given that Miami was so much hotter than some of the other places we've been to this year. So I
Mhm.
was hoping that wouldn't cook things and cause problems, and thankfully it didn't. So
Yeah, yeah. So it was, yeah, and it didn't. And I think the key is if they have the time to work on it, they don't create the problem. Which is interesting because again, the heavy steering precipitated the leak, which precipitated the fire.
right.
So just something to watch for in the future. But it could be part of the design, something they'll fix. But the key is on when it came to quali in P3 on Saturday, they got over it and the car was strong and they had no issues.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and touch on qualifying then.
Go for it.
I
Go for it.
thought it was quite an interesting session because I remember in Q1, Hamilton didn't what he was going to be eliminated until he finally got a lap right at the end that put him well into the top 10. But he had a couple of not so great laps. And I was sitting there going, everyone's was talking about, especially with Russell topping free practice too. They're like, oh, look, Mercedes is back. And I'm like, well, we'll wait and see. And then Hamilton is having a bit of an issue. Now, that could have been specifically just execution and not something to do with the car, where like he didn't get an exit properly. But
At that point, I think you'd have to say it was execution, simply because of how well he did on his lap.
right.
But it was interesting because it's like another logistical error in qualifying that he barely made the time cutoff to get
Hmm.
like a hot lap in and then a time lap, to do an out lap, push lap, and then to get the push lap in the time.
Well, and then on that specific note, in Q2, they sent him out a second time and burned a second pair of softs in that session when they didn't need to. He didn't improve on his time in the second lap, and he was well clear of the elimination zone, as they call it.
Yeah, so we should probably expand on that a little bit.
Yeah.
They sent him out again when he was safe. He wasn't safe from elimination, and they didn't change anything on the car. They didn't
Yeah.
change anything. They didn't, they didn't change the tires. They didn't appear to change anything, but
I
it
thought they
looked
gave
like
him a
he
new
was
set of tires.
maybe. No, I in my mind they changed nothing. That's why it made no sense to me.
Oh, okay.
If they changed tires, then it's like, okay, go for it. I don't think they changed anything. I think he was on mediums.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
And
not sure.
it might have been softs, but regardless, the point is, it's like, why are they doing this? He's already safe. This is not Q3. I don't get it. Because what if he wads the car up in a corner? Now you
Right.
don't, you don't make Q3. This is not good.
Yeah, because bear in mind, every practice session was red flagged due to someone having a problem and ending up in the wall or something. And so to me,
Yeah,
I'm looking at that going, it every time you send a guy out, now obviously you have to a certain number of times, but every time you send your guy out, that's a risk he could end up in the wall on a new track with not a great surface like the drivers were complaining about. So yeah, I don't know what was up with that.
yeah, but the he didn't even complete the lap. He backed out of it. So seemed like an absolute waste of time to me. And
Yeah.
because of that, I think that was their, like, last set of soft tires, or it may have been after, Q3. Yeah, that was like they kinda burned another set of tires, they used one in Q3. They didn't have a good set of softs for the race itself today, in case they needed it.
Right.
So, it was I don't know, the whole thing, that particular movement or moment just didn't make sense to me. But
Yeah.
now, granted, there may have been some reason, but I didn't see it, and I got the feeling that the people that were there commentating were kind of scratching their heads as well as to why was Lewis going out again.
Yeah.
Nobody else did, and he was already in like sixth or whatever it was. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so the only other thing about, Q2 that I was curious about was
hmm
that, both Ricciardo and Russell were eliminated in Q2 when both Norris and Hamilton were well into the top 10. So I don't know if it was something to do with their setups. I don't know if it was just a execution error like we were talking, or what happened into that, because it seemed like both the McLaren car and the Mercedes car were a Q3 car this weekend. And yet Russell and Ricardo didn't make that work. So I don't know what's up with that.
yeah, I don't have an well, so Russell's car and Lewis's car, obviously, they have different mechanic teams, different engineers, so they're set up slightly differently. They're not mirrored images of each other.
Sure.
So they did try to make a few changes. Mercedes did bring significant changes to the car this weekend,
Mm,
and it didn't work. Whatever it is they did not work. So, I mean, it worked to some degree, but then it's like whack-a-mole. It it worked in one part, and then another problem sprung up. That was kind of what Toto Wolff
mm.
was saying after qualifying. He looked very frustrated and said, "No, the thing still bounces like a kangaroo." And I
Yeah.
thought that was hilarious. This is what we feared about Mercedes. They either fixed the problem in Miami or it was gonna be whack-a-mole all over again, which is where it
Right.
appears to be still.
Yeah.
So, they are a 4th tier team at this point. I don't know, 3rd tier maybe, but, you know
Yeah. I don't know. I think obviously it's a long season and we're still early. So who knows where things will end up. But as of right now, they're well clear of McLaren, but they're also way behind Red Bull. So they seem to be pretty solidly third. But, who knows how things will develop. So, moving on to Q3 then, it actually kind of went back and forth quite a lot. The drivers were shuffling around the running order quite a bit, but Max had a really, really solid lap before everybody went back out for their final run.
Mhm.
So he was out in front, and then you had both Ferraris behind him. And then when they went through their final run to get their final time in for the session, Max touched one of the inside curbs in a corner and lost a sufficient amount of grip and had to catch the car. He didn't end up at the wall or even spin or anything, but it was enough to ruin the lap.
No, 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 it was a very brief event, but it did cost him
Right.
time.
And it lost him the lap. Meanwhile, Leclerc and Sainz both put in very good times and they ended up getting pole and second respectively. And so
Right, right.
bumped Max down to starting third.
And like I said, the Ferraris look really fast this year. That's what we
Yeah.
talked about in our prediction segment.
Yeah.
So they are fast. And hats off to Leclerc. he did not make a mistake. He put a flyer in he deserved pole.
Yeah, honestly, I think you could say that about him all weekend. He didn't make a
Yeah.
single mistake throughout qualifying, throughout the race. I don't even remember anything from him during practice either.
No, Max made more mistakes technically over the weekend than Leclerc did by
Right.
far.
Yeah.
But Max has a faster it turns out Red Bull had the faster car
Yeah. Yeah.
in the straights, which is why Leclerc couldn't pass him, and we'll get to that later.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, so final order for the top 5 of Q3 was Leclerc, then Sainz, then Verstappen, then Perez. So the top 4 wasn't that surprising. But
right.
then Bottas in P5. So
Yep.
how cool is that?
Well, especially after he'd wrecked his car in practice. That was
Right.
great.
Right.
It was great, and you know how you and I have commented in past videos that he appears to be just so happy and like 10 years
Yeah.
younger. We've used terms like this.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually caught some commentary this week where the quote was he was quoted as saying, "This is the happiest time in my life and the happiest time in my racing life."
Yeah.
Like the guy could not be in a better position in life. He's super happy, and his goal right now is just honestly to finish in front of his old teammate Hamilton. He
Yeah.
loves doing that. I'm sure it's a friendly rivalry, but he loves doing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's on top of the world. He thought he was leaving for an inferior team, and
Yeah.
Lewis probably goaded him about that. Oh, you're one of those guys going to collect a paycheck and come in eighth.
Yeah, yeah.
And then here he is, you know, beating Lewis every race. It's like this is awesome. So good old Valtteri. Good. Today toward the end didn't go so well, but qualifying was great.
Yeah, I genuinely was worried about him last year because Alpha last year was just they were nowhere. They were barely better than Haas, which wasn't saying much. But this year, I mean, they did what Haas did, and they switched over quite early to developing this year's car, and it's paid off for him. And so Bottas going from a number 2 wingman to the actual team lead, and kind of directing the trajectory of a team in a way like that's just he loves it. So I'm happy to see it. All right, so then the race itself, how crazy was that? I mean,
What a race.
I personally was expecting like 3 4 safety cars throughout the race, but we only got one. I
Well, we
was
were
amazed.
we were expecting, I think you meant to say red flags,
Well, I was
not
expecting
safety
one red flag at least. Yeah.
Okay, at least one red flag, 3 or 4 safety cars. We had 2 safety cars, no red flags. I'm shocked too.
Yeah.
Now that track has the potential for at least 1 or 2 red flags and, 3 or 4 safety cars. It has the potential for it. But to be honest, the drivers learned the track in practice and they were able to negotiate it really well, which to be honest is a credit to their professionalism and what they do for a living. They
Absolutely.
they I was really impressed. They learned this track and they did it well. And in fact, the Norris incident that came up toward like lap 40, somewhere around there,
Yeah.
30, 38, 39, 40, that where he got into
Gasly.
who was it? Gasly. But that was just a straight line racing, no corners involved, no
Mhm.
weird had it was not track specific, that was driver specific.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happened. It was like a racing incident.
Yeah, I don't think the stewards even noted it as something that they would investigate. So,
It never came up on the screen that I saw where they were even looking at it. It
yeah.
was a racing incident. They crowded each other, and Gasly, drove away from it, and Norris's day
He
was
ended up
over.
retiring. He DNF'd, but,
Yeah, it was a few laps later, but he
yeah,
did drive away from it, and then and Norris didn't.
right.
Had his car had to be hauled off on the crane. So
Yeah, you and I were texting each other kinda during the lead up to the race, and because, we caught it live, and we were like, 65-70% chance of a red flag on lap 1, and, nothing happened, which
that
I
was in
think
the early 30s, like lap 33, somewhere in there, 32. I'm saying, yeah, I go, what do you think the percentage of a red flag is at this point? Because sometimes in the middle of a race, drivers can kind of get complacent. They relax a little bit. They're like, okay, I know the track, just hang in there till the end. And sometimes you can have a momentary lack of concentration at that point in a race. It happens in NASCAR, happens in racing. And that's when something will bite you, like a really technical track like Miami. And it just didn't happen. These guys kept their focus, they kept it up, and there were some, interesting moments, but no red flag, nothing really bad.
I wonder if that played into the Gasly Norris incident, if that was just kind of a brief lapse in judgment from both parties, because Norris had there was no reason for him to be that close to Gasly, and Gasly just didn't really check his mirrors for like a half second, which is all it needs.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look at that again. I just didn't see Gasly move over,
He moved over a
like
little bit from the onboards. It looked like he moved over a little bit, but
I saw it. I just couldn't. I saw it, but I couldn't see it. I could.
yeah,
It's like there they are, and then now there's an accident. And when you look at Norris's onboard, he's got like 6 feet, 10 feet off to his left, and then he kind of comes in on Gasly. But it was clearly Gasly didn't know he was there,
right,
which is probably what caused the problem. But
right.
he only moved over an inch or two and nailed it. So that's probably why the stewards didn't even look at it. It was so
Yeah, yeah,
close.
yeah. No, I'm not saying it was like predominantly Gasly's fault or anything. It was just to me, it was a lapse in attention on both parties for a brief moment.
Yeah, I think it was. It was at that point, right? Like I said, we're lap 40, a little bit closer to the end, but it's at that point where they're just kind of they feel like they're used to the track. They got it, everything's good. And Norris, it was great that he was passing Gasly, but he just got on this. He should have given himself a little more room. Basically, don't ever put yourself in a position where you're relying on the other guy to finish your race. Whenever you can avoid doing that and take control of your own destiny on the racetrack, do it. And he didn't do that.
Yeah, yeah,
He put himself in a position where he had to rely very, very much on Gasly to not move over, and he paid the price for it.
yeah,
So, I just think it's, not to get back into it, but it's like the science thing, in Emma, just why? Don't take the risk.
yeah.
And so we see a trend. It's just the way it's one thing I've seen, in racing, just something you see and you're like, why? You don't need to do that. And
Yeah,
then there's other times where somebody just flat out creams you and there's nothing you can do about it. You're innocently driving a perfect race and then some guy, ricochets across the track and destroys your car. In that case, there's nothing you can do. But yeah, this is certainly not one of those 100% innocent cases.
no, 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 not anywhere close. Not anywhere close.
No.
I frankly was expecting far more incidents. We did see another incident very late, like I don't know, 4 or 5 laps to go, something like, where Mick Schumacher kind of did a bit of a dive bomb up the inside of Vettel and actually collided pretty substantially. Now both drivers went on to finish because they were so close to the end, but Vettel ended up last on the road and a few laps down, I believe. Though he may have been
No,
considered a DNF.
Vettel DNF'd. He didn't finish the
Oh,
race.
they didn't. Okay, I saw mixed reports. I saw one place say he DNF'd, and yet on the actual official feed, it looked like he was just 3 laps down. But
It showed him in the pits getting out of his car.
oh, that's right, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took out Vettel right at the end, and it was just like I don't know, like it kind of sucks for them, those two in particular, because they actually it's kind of like a mentor mentee kind of relationship that they have, and then for poor Mick Schumacher to just take his buddy out is just like you hate to see it.
See, I don't. I'm not sure that's what happened. I don't know if you can say Mick took Vettel out or Vettel took Mick out. Again, that's one I have to go back and rewatch.
Oh, that's completely fair. I looked at it as a dive bomb up the inside, but I haven't reviewed the footage, so I could have been completely wrong on that.
Yeah, because what I heard on the radio, and I can't say that's not true. Okay, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you,
Okay.
but they it was so close to the end of the race, they didn't focus a lot of time on it
Right.
because you had Russell and Hamilton vying for, fifth and or sixth and seventh place,
Right, right.
or fifth and sixth, whatever it wound up being. But, but the issue was that I looked at that and they showed it once again, and it was hard for me to really tell definitively what went on.
Yeah.
But what I heard in Mick's voice, I heard like this like a small child who just lost his ice cream cone that he's been looking forward to for hours, and he just went, "It was my corner. Like, why did he do that?" He was completely shocked. If you listen to it back,
Okay.
you'll laugh because he sounds like a little kid who lost his ice cream.
Okay.
it was my corner. And I kind of laughed when I heard it, but it was a very innocent plaintive, like, hey, what happened?
Yeah.
And so I think Vettel got too aggressive, and I think he, came in on him a little bit, and Mick may have gone up a little bit on the corner, but maybe he didn't have a choice. But I'm gonna go back and rewatch that one
Yeah,
because
yeah.
and I don't think I saw anything that the stewards were investigating that either.
Yeah, I don't know. It's also interesting though because both Haas drivers and both Astons got into it with each other. They actually collided because they you saw after that incident, you saw a little bit later, like the next lap or something, that Magnussen hit the inside of Stroll very
Yeah,
lightly. Not neither were significantly damaged, but it was just like, okay, what's up with these two teams here? What's going on?
right. But that was being investigated. The
Yeah,
stewards
yeah, it
did have a
was.
look at that. That one
Yeah,
was different.
yeah.
They're like, "Nah, we need to have a look at this," and they
Yeah.
probably did have a look at the other one with poor Mick and
Yeah, but
Sebastian,
what's
but
really interesting to me about all of that was that that was pretty much the only contact that we saw throughout the whole race. The
yeah.
Norris Gasly thing and then the Haas and Astons. Now there was a little bit between I think Alonso and somebody else that I don't recall off the top of my head,
Mhm.
but neither car was particularly damaged, and other than that, like there wasn't any contact. I was expecting on lap 1 at the very, very start, I was expecting because turn 1 is always where problems happen. But I think it's maybe a credit to the track designer in that track 1 isn't a terribly sharp turn, and so you're not having everyone trying to, funnel into the same area. They can just kinda spread out and go on about their lap.
It seems to me that track lap 1 incidents in general are I don't know, I just don't see quite as many of them as we've seen in the past. I think they with the world coverage and all the different social media sites, there's so much attention paid to stuff like that nowadays that I think the drivers are cognizant, like, hey, we need to have a first few clean laps, like they
Yeah,
don't want to be the center of negative attention. And in years gone by, it was like a knife fight in the first few corners.
true.
It's like, oh my gosh, look what's happening. You don't quite see it the same way anymore, but oh my goodness, it was crazy.
Well, I mean, tell that to Bottas in Hungary last year,
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Well, I mean, it happens. It definitely
Yeah, yeah.
happens. But
Yeah. But yeah, so that was pretty cool. So let's move on to overall kind of results. Let me just run through the top 10 really
sure.
quickly here. Obviously, Max Verstappen took it home and won. He won from
Yay!
third, which was pretty cool for him.
Hmm.
And he also seemed to have won fairly comfortably, but we'll get onto that in a second. Behind him was Leclerc. Behind him was Sainz. Behind him was Perez. So again, you
And
have
Ford.
both Red Bulls, both Ferraris in the top four.
Yeah.
And then after that, we've got Russell, then Hamilton, then Bottas, then Ocon, then Alonso, then Albon,
Yes.
down in 10th. And so I think we're actually seeing a trend here of where we may end up later on in the season of Red Bulls and Ferraris fighting each other, and then Mercedes in a pretty comfortable third, and then Alpines in a fourth, maybe fifth, pretty comfortably. And I just think it's interesting that both
Where
of
do you
them.
see McLaren in that though?
I see them more on pace with Alpine right now. They
Huh.
could very easily bring it back and be fighting Mercedes again, but they're just quite a ways behind them in the championship right now. So either they need to get their act together and uh, put in some solid results and finish races well and in the points,
Yeah. I
or
I think
I
McLaren's
don't know.
biggest problem right now is Daniel Ricciardo. I hate to say it.
Yeah,
If
I
they
mean,
had if they had two Lando Norrises, it would be a completely different story.
yeah, except that Ricardo finished and Norris didn't. But
Well, I'm just saying based on the first, 5 races or whatever
yeah,
this
no, no,
year.
no. The trend is absolutely that. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, yeah, Daniel
Yeah.
Daniel just because he doesn't crash doesn't mean he places well.
Right. Right.
He didn't crash in Imola, but he finished last in the runners, 17th place or whatever.
Yeah, he didn't get into Q3 in qualifying this weekend, and then also just kind of we didn't see anything from him. He was just kind of in the same spot on the track all race and
Yeah,
finished 11th.
and he
And it
was
was
really
like,
defensive when they interviewed him about that. They said, "Hey, you what happened, with Q2? What happened?"
mm,
And he goes, "Well, there's it's good news, bad news. Let's focus on the good news, which is Q1. I did really well. And you could tell he looked really defensive when he said it. And then he
Mm,
went ahead and said, "Yeah, but Q2 we didn't get that, blah blah blah." But yeah, he didn't get into Q3. And then but the
yeah,
problem is you have Norris in very similar car, just
yeah.
killing it.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about him a lot, and like I still just kind of don't know what's up with him because, you and I, we like him and we'd like to see him do
Yeah.
better, but he's just consistently underperforming, and I still don't know why.
Yep.
But
He's having a hard time. It's either I- you know, I think originally the excuse everybody gives him, well, it takes him a while to adjust to a new car. That's what we were told last year, and he never really did. And then so this year there's a little bit of that, but it's not quite as much. So, that's I just think he's having I don't know that it's a car adjustment thing. I think it's I think it's in his head or in his skill level. He is getting older. He's been around longer than people realize.
yeah, true.
He has not been successful since he left Red Bull, let's face it.
Yeah.
And he didn't really want to compete with Max. That was the reason he supposedly left Red Bull. He didn't want to compete with Max Verstappen as a teammate. And so he
Mm,
bailed out rather than face that competition. But I don't think it's really paid off for him since. And it may
mm-mm.
be to a point where that was his best chance in the sport. He made a bad decision, we all do, and this is where he is now. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of sucks because like he's clearly a skilled driver, but because he's gotten wins since then, he's gotten podiums since then, but it's just we don't necessarily need to carry on about Ricardo so much. Let's talk about the Ferraris. How do you think their weekend went, and how do you think their weekend went?
Well, based on the look on Mattia's face and the engineer at the end of the race, it didn't go as well. According to them, it didn't go as well as I thought it went for them.
Yeah.
you
I mean,
know,
I was looking at it going, I don't think they had much to complain about. Obviously, they would have liked to win the race, but I mean, it's Max Verstappen, and the Red Bulls are competitive, so like it's hard to keep somebody like him off of you, right? So to me, it was like, hey, two podiums, the front row lockout for the qualifying. That's a pretty good weekend. But yeah, Matteo Binotto didn't seem to think so.
it just yeah, just reading the body language, the look on his face at the end, and along with the engineer, they looked really unhappy. They weren't, and, where if you get like Norris was jumping up and down with joy last race to have third place. It's like you didn't see anything like that for second and third.
Yeah.
I think Ferrari, as we've mentioned more than once, they set the bar very high. Their
Yep.
expectation was first and second place.
Yep.
They qualified first and second, and that did not happen. So they were displeased with not being able to catch Max. And I can't blame them. The goal is perfection. This is where
True.
it can be a really tough sport, and running at the very top is the toughest place to be.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, it's like way harder on Mercedes. If Lando had come in Lewis's spot, he would have been thrilled. At the end of the race, he still would have been happy.
True.
Like, hey, we're doing great. But so
Yeah.
when you're a mid pack field and you're finishing fifth and sixth, it's like, hey, we're in there, man. We're at the top of the mid pack. But when you're
Mhm.
Mercedes, fifth and sixth, you feel like, jumping off of a building. It's like, no, my life's over. Why aren't we in first place? And then when you're Mercedes and Ferrari, then whoever's on top is going to be thrilled. In this case, Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and whoever isn't is not.
Yeah.
Second place is the first loser. I mean, that's the attitude with these guys.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that's going to affect their mentality as a team because to me it's like it's a very different environment to be in if you're just like if you're mad that you didn't get first, whereas you could just be excited that you had a good showing, both drivers finished on the podium, so which means they both finished and you're still ahead in the championship and like things are still pretty good. Like if you came to it maybe with that perspective, you might have a little bit more of a lighthearted environment rather than what could be happening. Pure speculation on my part here. But what could be happening is that they're taking things really seriously as you would expect, but that they're not taking a moment to appreciate that they're still doing really well. Maybe not as well as they would have liked, but hey, it's still pretty well. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple points in there that I think you're right on about. That they should. I mean, they didn't lose a whole lot of ground in the drivers' championship or
No,
the constructors' championship.
no,
They lost a little bit of ground, but not a ton. It's not like they had a DNF like they did last race with Sainz. So,
right.
I wouldn't. But the only thing I would say slightly differently is I wouldn't say that they were like Mattia was mad. I think he was just clearly disappointed. He was
Yeah,
unsatisfied
fair.
and
Yeah,
disappointed clearly. And I can't fault a guy for being. I mean, I wish they weren't, but if he telegraphs satisfaction with second and third place, he's probably going to get a call from Enzo Ferrari from his grave going, "What are you doing? Being satisfied with second, you know?"
that is fair. This is Ferrari we're talking about. Yeah,
So, that's what I meant by Ferrari are tough. He really has to
yeah.
play a game there. He cannot be satisfied with anything other than a first place podium.
Best is the standard. Yeah,
But I think in the team, I don't think it's not like what I sense about Mercedes, where there's a dark cloud and kind of a real tension and
yeah. Fair point.
an anger over this kind of existing within the pits now. It's like
Yeah,
there's a desperation at Mercedes that is
yeah.
there's going to be some interesting of course a lot of it's going to be clickbait, but there's going to be some interesting stories coming out over the next 2 weeks about Mercedes on YouTube and other places, where they where they're make it sound like they have some breaking news, and it's really just old news
Right.
that's been
Yeah.
rehashed. But in the midst of that, there will be on some of the better channels some interesting information coming out, because this is getting real now, folks. You you have the Spanish Grand Prix coming up, and then you have the Canadian Grand Prix, and then you have Monaco. Or do I have it backwards? No, Spanish Grand
I
Prix.
think you have it backwards. Yeah, it's Spain, Monaco, Azerbaijan, then Canada.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and now Monaco, Mercedes may actually do a little better in because of the speed and things like that. So it
True. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
Well, that leads me on to a point I was wanting to discuss quite thoroughly with you. They seem to have made a solid step forward because they were going from quite a ways behind to behind, but not so badly behind. And both of their drivers finished fifth and sixth. So they seem to have made a few steps forward. But do you think that is specifically this track that suited them, that they were able to set up for in a way that wasn't as compromising in other areas? Or do you think they actually have a genuine step forward?
Well, you know, considering where Russell placed in Imola, I think they duplicated Russell's results. And Lewis had a bad set of circumstances in Imola.
True.
I think they're finishing uh they're finishing in Imola, with the exception of Lewis. I think that was the exception. They're a 5th and 6th team, and, barring last lap, jitters, maybe 4th and 5th. If somebody crashes out trying to
Right,
be
right.
a hero at the end of the race, then they can have 4th and 5th. But this is where they are. I don't see them being any worse or any better after Miami.
Okay.
I think they're right where they are. I seen that, and the net result was nothing changed, in my opinion.
Okay.
And that's now that could have something to do with the track. Maybe these improvements are going to shine on a track like Monaco. I don't know, but frankly, I think what you have is they are the third place team, clearly. And
Yeah.
I honestly think if McLaren can have just a little bit of luck, and these drivers can, if Daniel can get over his thing or whatever it is, learn, become super comfortable with the car and just kind of shake off this stuff, and Lando can grow up a little bit and not make mistakes. I think there's times where basically McLaren and Mercedes could be vying for third and fourth, just like Ferrari and Red Bull are vying for first and second. I think it's possible. Now, there are some other wild card teams, like you said, AlphaTauri, Alonso, with Alpine. Who knows where they might all of a sudden have some luck, and now we're talking about a
True,
different
true.
set of people. But I see him right where they belong. Now, what I thought was very interesting is you have Russell passing without any apparent problem, Lewis, toward the end of the race. Now, he did have a new set of tires. He got a new set of
Right.
mediums. He had newer tires. Lewis was not happy with that. So this is not going
No.
to improve the mood in the pits.
To be fair to him, though, it was another one of these victim of circumstance situations because he didn't have an opportunity to pit without losing position, whereas Russell did.
Right.
Though I think actually Russell dropped behind Hamilton when he pit. I don't remember, but regardless, Hamilton didn't really have a safe opportunity to pit, whereas Russell did, and so Russell was just happenstantially based on the circumstances that happened to be the case. Russell made it out better, and Hamilton didn't, and so
Well, if you remember, the reason Russell did so well is he chose to hang on in case there was a safety car. So he ran
that is also
well,
true.
that
That's
was
very
the whole
true.
reason he did well. He was
Yeah,
down
he
in 12th or
started the race
something
on hard
before.
tires and held out until a
He
safety
held
car.
out
Yeah,
way into the race, and on the
yeah,
radio, he said, "Hey, guys, let's hold out in case there's a safety car," and
true,
it
true.
worked. He was just about to wear the tires out,
Yeah.
and there's a safety car. He could not have been luckier.
No, yeah, yeah,
And then that's how he got the fresh set of mediums. Now, earlier in the race, they asked Lewis, "What do you want to do?" And he said, "No, no, I'm not. I can't come in. I can't give up position."
yeah,
So Lewis had a chance to do it, but he seems to be have a short-term memory problem on the track when it comes to
yeah,
decisions that even he weighs in on, but they don't go his way because his transmission to the team was, well, gee, okay, guys, but gee, the strategy never seems to favor me.
yeah, it was something like that, yeah,
It was those words, maybe in a slightly different order, but he said something like
yeah,
this: our team strategy never seems to favor me. Now,
yeah,
does
yeah.
that mean favor me personally, or just, the way it worked out, it didn't favor me? Gosh darn it! But why? I don't know. I just kind of saw that as him being frustrated. I understand
Yeah, that is something we've seen from Hamilton is there's things like that that he says over the radio,
that.
and he has to be aware that that stuff gets broadcast, and, like, I would just like to see that not happen from somebody that's been around for as long as him.
Like we said last time we talked, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and
True, yeah,
he is
yeah,
that guy. He'll always be that guy. I don't think that'll change before he leaves F1.
yeah,
So, but that's and again, I just take it at face value. I accept his frustration, but I just kind of find it humorous,
yeah,
that that he played as much of a role in that decision as anybody, but I think it still bugged him that
yeah,
Russell had better tires, and now Russell couldn't pass him without DRS, but with it, it was easy.
true,
And
true,
then, but Lewis could not respond to that. He had no response to it because Russell had better tires. So, you
right,
have each team has a different engineer, different mechanics. You can make your own decisions. And Russell simply he threw the dice and he won. And he seems to be doing that. Russell's like
yeah.
he's got the golden touch right now. It seems like whatever he does seems to work. And there he was in front of Lewis. And has Lewis maybe one time this year finished in front of Russell? I guess at the very
In Bahrain, he got 3rd, Russell got 4th, but every other time Russell has finished ahead of him, yeah.
yeah
Which is interesting because that happened again. So I get to pat myself on the back here a little bit because I predicted that Russell would get 5th, and hey, Russell got 5th.
yeah there you
So
go, there you go.
but I think honestly, Mercedes, obviously, they're not anywhere close to where they would like to be. However, I think they should be pretty happy with this weekend because they did as well as a team as they could have expected to get, as well as they could have hoped because they're just not on the pace of Ferrari and Red Bull. However, they finished immediately right behind them with both of their drivers. So
Well,
hey,
now
good haul of points.
I'm gonna challenge that a little bit. The only reason
Okay.
they were immediately behind was due to the safety car. Prior to that, they were way far behind
Granted, yeah,
them.
I didn't mean immediately in terms of pace. I
Okay,
mean, they were
okay,
5th and 6th, which is as close to them as you can
okay,
get
yeah,
on
yeah.
the road.
But they're
Yeah.
they're in a different category of cars. What I'm
Granted,
trying to say.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
during the race they were like what 17
Yeah.
seconds back or something from third
Yeah.
place. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
Well, and also Bottas finished 7th, but he was ahead of both of them up until the last few laps, where he just went wide and
He
hit the
ran
wall
wide.
briefly,
Yeah, he
kept his
ran
car together,
wide, flat
but
spotted his tires. Mia had to come in for a change. Yeah, that ruined his race.
yeah. But I mean, he
So
still finished 7th, so hey, a
yeah,
good points finish for Alpha.
yeah, yeah. I like we're Valtteri Bottas fans. We both like him a lot.
Yeah.
But he did. He ran wide. Had a mistake. Didn't damage the car again. But that is a rough track, and it was hot.
Yeah, yeah.
Valtteri is from Norway, where it's really really cold all the time. So he's a very fair skinned, very almost white hair, blonde haired guy, blue eyes. He's not used to this heat like down in Miami. So it was probably harder for him than it would be for for me or you or Checo or somebody like that that's used to
Yeah.
even
I
for.
don't know, they race in the Middle East all the time, he might be used to it by now.
Well, it's hotter. I think I don't know what the humidity's like in the Middle East. No idea. And that was earlier in the year. But this was the hottest race so far this season by far.
True, true, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it was kind of interesting. So
Well, yeah, even Max after the race, he was, like, breathing really heavily and had to, like, take a minute to drink a whole bunch of water, like,
And he
he
and
was
he
exhausted.
and he and Leclerc both said this was a very physically demanding race.
Yeah.
That's something about the track. This was no cakewalk track. This was a seriously challenging track, which
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad to see. I like it. This is one of my favorite races now.
yeah,
I like it.
yeah. Wrapping up real briefly about Alfa Romeo, though,
Uh-huh.
what happened with Zhou Guanyu?
He had a mechanical. They told him to come in.
Yeah.
They
Do we know
asked.
what that was?
I don't believe that was disclosed
Okay,
during the race. It might have been. I didn't catch it.
okay. But then, we mentioned it briefly earlier, however, Ocon and Alonso finished 8th and 9th, and both of them were pretty much back of the grid starters. They were way back there. So, great showing from Alpine.
Yeah, I need to go back and see what happened to the mid pack. Now that I can relax and I know how the race ends, I do want to watch it again and see kind of what went on
Yeah.
more in the mid packs that I wasn't paying as close of attention to because it was exciting up front, guys.
Yeah, well, there's a strategy that oftentimes is employed by people who start at the back but think they have a pretty competitive car, which is you just take the hard tires and see how far you can take them into the race and hope that you can get a good track position before you have to pit again. That's what Russell did, and it paid off beautifully for
Yep.
him. I wonder if something similar happened to Ocon and Alonso because I'm pretty sure they both started on the hards as well.
Well,
And I don't know when they pit the first time. It may have been during the safety car.
almost everybody started on mediums, including Alonso. Couldn't say about Ocon. I didn't note it, but I noticed.
Ocon was for sure on the hards. I don't
Well,
recall about
I
Alonso.
know for a fact that Alonso was on mediums, but when he came
Okay.
in pretty early for a tire change, he went to hards, and that was it. I don't
Right,
think he
right.
ever
Okay.
went back for tires.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
he just made it work.
yeah, he made it work, and it's one of those things. Sometimes it depends on the car. Some cars do really well with one compound and not another, and then another team
True.
will have the opposite experience. So yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind.
But what was also really good to see about Alonso was that he not only finished the race after a couple of DNFs due to things completely outside of his control, some mechanical issues in the last few races, but he also finished in the points. And so that's a really good showing from him and a good turnaround after a couple of what I can imagine would be very frustrating weekends prior.
Yeah, yes, for sure after Imola. Yeah, uh, DNF'd, and he would not want that
Yeah.
again. But he's a great driver. I think he's somebody who's probably going to finish. I could easily see him finishing fifth, sixth in the points. We'll have to see how Mercedes does if they have some DNFs, but he's definitely going to be in the top 10 in points. I could easily see that. And where he is, relative to Hamilton will be interesting to know.
Yeah.
You know, what's kind of funny is before the race today, I was rewatching the 2004 U.S. Grand Prix at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but
Oh,
they
nice.
ran it the other direction. They ran it
Oh,
clockwise
interesting.
instead of counterclockwise. But and guess who was driving for Renault or Benetton Renault? It was a young Fernando Alonso in
Yeah.
2004. And I thought, oh, this is hilarious. He's like the only one of these guys still racing. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Vettel might have been.
Well,
I don't
Kimmy would
think
have
Vettel
been
was
as
there.
well, right?
Yeah, but he's not racing this year. So
Oh, well, true. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay.
anyway, but yeah, Kimmy was there, and all the other guys are retired. In other words, but it was pretty cool.
Right,
Pretty
right.
cool. That was a
Yeah.
yeah. But hey, speaking of the heat in Miami, I do have one little tidbit. My wife was watching the end of the race and she saw the drivers come in and get weighed after the race was over. And she goes, "Why are they weighing the drivers?" And I thought, that's probably something I imagine we had some new viewers to Formula One or new viewers this year to the sport, and they don't know exactly why the drivers in the cars are weighed. And I thought I'd give that information. So
Yeah.
and this changes. It some doesn't have to change from year to year, but it did change in 2022. But generally speaking, the cars themselves have a minimum weight limit, and the drivers, and now what changes is that can include the driver, or this year the driver is separate. So the cars have to weigh a minimum of 795 kilograms is the minimum weight of a car. It can weigh more than that. But the driver and his gear, meaning his race suit and his helmet and his seat, have to weigh 80 kilograms. So they weigh them before the race to make sure. And if you have a driver that's light, then you have to add weight to the car to get to the 80-kilogram minimum.
Mm.
And so that way drivers that are, taller and weigh more aren't penalized as much. But they even specify that they have to put the weight in the area of the seat. You can't use the ballast weight to make your car even faster by putting it in some other part of the chassis.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Which of course they would do if they
oh, of
could.
course, yeah, yeah, that's why they have the regs. Somebody didn't do that. Somebody went, "Oh,
Yeah.
good, we have a driver that weighs 100 pounds. Now we can put ballast where we really need it."
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so they weigh them after the race to make sure they're still at the minimum weight, because they can lose quite a bit of weight on a day like today. They can lose 3 or 4 kilograms of weight just through sweating. So they're drinking
Right.
water during the race, and they have to maintain that, but they have to come out with an 80-kilogram minimum even at the end of the race, or there'll be a penalty.
Yeah, so it's basically just to make sure they're not sandbagging ahead of time, and then just, like, effectively, you could theoretically, if you were a really light person, you could, like, put extra weight in your suit or something and then take it out right before the race. But so weighing them immediately after the race means it prevents that kinda thing from happening.
Yeah, because Lewis was quoted one time, I remember, as saying that over the course of an entire race, 1 kilogram of extra weight on him as a person will have like a 2-second longer result at the end of the race. Just
Wow.
1 kilogram of weight over the course of a race can add two
Wow.
seconds to the drive or something. They figured these things out. In other words,
It just again shows how absolutely precisely fine-tuned these cars are, that something that small could have that significant an effect.
yeah, and why these guys are all, they train hard and they eat what they're
Yeah.
told to eat, and
Yeah.
these guys tend to be short. They're like 5'5", 5'6" kind of guys. They're not
I mean, some of them are taller. I think Max is 6 foot, but yeah.
well, and Russell's like, or I think he's like 6'2" or something,
Yeah,
it's like
something
he's
like,
huge,
yeah.
but also
But
very thin. But yeah, but they tend to be like horse jockeys. That is the best
yeah, yeah.
driver, and because they're lightweight, because weight is everything in a racing car. And
Weight is everything.
yeah, and the lighter they are, the faster they're gonna go. So there you go. But anyway, I thought I explained to her what it was, and I thought, if you don't know what that is, I should probably mention that, because I bet there's other people that might be wondering as well. So there you go. There's your useless trivia of the day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's gonna do it for us for the, weekend recap for the Miami Grand Prix. I certainly think it was a pretty fantastic weekend overall, especially considering it was a new track and you never know what's gonna happen, but next on the calendar is actually Spain. And so Spain is a long and storied track that's been around since the 90s in F1, been around longer than that, I think, overall. But hey, cool track. They do their preseason testing there, and I'm sure that'll be quite interesting.
The
However, there's a
Circuit de Catalunya.
yeah, anyone who actually speaks Spanish is going to be cringing right now. But
That was perfect. What are you talking about?
no, it
They,
wasn't.
they have a different accent over there. You wouldn't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, whatever. Anyway, there is a bye week in between races, and so we will be back next Monday for a topic that has yet to be determined, but be sure to tune in for that. At any rate, we'll see you then. Thanks so much for tuning in, and take care of yourselves.